Hey all, it is Nikki. Welcome back to the channel for a video that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. Today we are opening and potentially shredding one of my first drafts ever. So I really have wanted to do a video like this for a while now. It's mostly because I have drafts that were started like 7, 8+ years ago, and I like to think that I have grown in my craft since then. Honestly, I haven't really gone back and looked at those original drafts, even of the stories that I'm currently working on, in like years. Is it because I'm afraid? Probably that was part of it for a long time. I just didn't want to see how bad the writing was. But now, honestly, I kind of feel like I'm in a better place. I'm not scared to look at them. I feel like I've learned a lot since then. So the draft that we're looking at today is one of the first drafts. It could be the first, but I'm not 100% sure because I didn't date any of my drafts in the past. Don't make that mistake. It is one of the first drafts of my current ongoing epic fantasy project, kind of before it was an epic fantasy and it was more of just like a Tolkien-inspired adventure. And I really do mean Tolkien-inspired. The first twinklings of this story began when I was probably in 7th grade, immediately after I finished watching The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings for the first time, and it shows. So here we go. The document is 181 pages long, which is really impressive that I was able to fit this entire story into just 181 computer pages. Now I can only get a third of that story in like 400+ computer pages, which I don't know exactly what that says. I think it's a good thing, but we'll see. Why don't we just start from the beginning? For the first time in 4 seasons, clouds clustered dark and threatening above the wasted lands, promising rain, but giving none. The fact that I haven't looked at this document in like a really long time, but still totally have that first sentence memorized, tells you how many times I have gone over this story with a fine-tooth comb. So as far as first lines go, I feel like that's not the worst one ever. Like, it's a solid sentence. There's nothing wrong with the sentence. That is one thing that I have really learned since then that I don't think I fully understood at the time. It's how important your opening is and how important your hook is. I know not every opening line is going to be like the most memorable thing that you ever read in your life, but it can certainly help, and especially if your opening sequence isn't that exciting, I feel like you really do need a killer opening line. For example, my personal favorite that I will remember forever and ever and ever because I think it's just the best hook that I've ever read in my entire life. It's from Brandon Sanderson's first Stormlight novel, The Way of Kings. Szeth Sun Valano, truthless of Shinovar, wore white on the day he was to kill a king. I see that I started with a prologue. I went with the like omniscient narrator, like overview of the entire world situation, kind of like what Galadriel does at the beginning of one of the Lord of the Rings movies. Again, we're seeing the Tolkien vibes coming through. I feel like I probably had Galadriel reading this in my head as I was writing it. We're meeting the main character. I'd be curious to see how my main character comes through, because I remember at the time not really liking him very much, which is not ideal if you're gonna write an entire like story or series about a character. If you as the author don't care, then the reader is definitely not going to care. Here's an example of another key pitfall that I had when I was first starting to write. Because I wanted to emulate that sort of like formal, old-timey vibe, I used really formal language, which to me meant too many words, like just adding words where words were not needed. For example, do not heed the words of that man. Like, okay, that's a sentence, but heed the words of that man? Why can't I just say heed that man's words? Or better yet, heed that man. Don't listen to that man. A lot of my language in this original draft was just so convoluted because I was trying to make it all like formal and sound like, you know, Gandalf could be saying it, but really I just sacrificed clarity. Wow, I can't believe how fast this plot moves in this draft. It's funny because my pacing was very fast. Like, things just happen like boom, 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 really quickly, and yet with way too many words. So it's this weird combined like way too many words, but then also way too few because things are happening way too quickly. Yikes. Ooh, cringe. Okay, so this is a moment that I also still sort of struggle writing, but I'm a lot happier with it now. In all my drafts, there's this reunion scene. I always really wanted to drive home the idea that this is super emotional, and in my original drafts, I did that by making it like super like teary and mushy-gushy, and now I can't look back on that without just not being impressed with it. It's almost like beating the reader over the head with the fact that you need to feel emotion right now. I don't think it's necessary for one, and I don't think it's realistic for those two characters. I'm happier with it now because it's more realistic, it's more awkward. Like, they're happy to see each other, but they also aren't like rushing into each other's arms and like crying and stuff, because it's super uncomfortable and awkward and they don't really know what to do with their relationship. So I like that a lot better. This one is cringe. Just so many words. Oh, now we're meeting the villain. I don't think I really understood him even as I was writing him. So this first scene when you're meeting him, it's the classic like walk into the throne room and the villain is sitting there in his throne creepily smiling. He's got a scar across one eye, like, ooh, that's never been done before. It was effective in the sense that it established clearly that this is the villain, but I think it was just a little bit shallow, but that is to be expected from like a first attempt at writing a fantasy story. One of the things that I did in this draft, which I have since learned is kind of a no-no, is I allowed my main character to just sort of be swept along by the story. He didn't really have a lot of agency in the decision, and he also didn't really have a lot of personality because of it. He was just sort of there to fill a spot, to fulfill a role. To a degree, I feel like that is part of the chosen one trope, because they obviously are chosen by someone for something. But at the same time, I feel like it's important to give the character enough personality that they still get to like make decisions and make mistakes that can have consequences. Now, having gone through the introductory stuff, why don't we skip ahead to the entry of my personal favorite character. Well, he was back then. I remember being so pumped to get to the part where this character came in. I can feel the excitement now. This character he was great. He's very moody, tortured, dark is maybe the best word. He was a favorite because he was just so cool, but at the same time, his relationship with the main character just made no sense. I mean, this harkens back to something that I said in I think my last video or maybe the one before that. If you're going to give a character a very strong personality trait, you need to justify that. Like, he needs to have a reason for being that way, otherwise it'll just fall flat. I can definitely see like the Tolkien vibes coming through. As much as I understand that that was my main source of inspiration, I think it can be very, very easy when you admire someone's work a lot and it inspires a story of your own. It can be really easy to just fall back on those ideas, and that's still difficult for me today. When I find an author that I really, really like and that inspires me, for example, Brandon Sanderson, The Stormlight Archive, I found myself sort of comparing our two stories a lot and trying to come up with ways to like make mine more like his. To a degree, that can be a good thing if it, strengthens your story, if it's helping you to hash out your vision for your story. But I'm also sensing that it has the potential to sort of drag you off course and to make you start writing something that you never really intended to write. That's dangerous because your story is yours, and like if God has given you a story to tell, it's fine to, take inspiration from other authors or from other work, especially if he's using their work to inspire you, but he wants you to tell the story that he's given you, not some other author's story, so that we're honoring him ultimately with what we're writing. I was like allergic to contractions, apparently. I'm not even sure that there's a single contraction in this entire story. I just thought that they would like ruin the story if someone said theirs instead of there is, or can't instead of cannot. Don't be afraid of contractions, people. They're fine. They're real words. They're legitimate words. There were a lot of weird sort of word rules that I had for myself that now I'm sort of seeing as I'm flipping through it. Upon instead of on. It was always upon, even though I'm not sure that that's grammatically correct. I think there are cases where on is more correct than upon. I never used the word off. Jump wouldn't have been allowed. It would have been like leap or bound. Sprint wouldn't have been allowed. Don't ask me why, it makes zero sense. Subdued by humiliation, he took his seat again, face pale and filled with shame. So we've already been told that he's subdued by humiliation, but I felt the need to let you know that his face is also filled with shame. Not necessary. We got that already. Oh, Nikki. Let's skip to the climax, shall we? I honestly don't even remember how this goes. The love confession at the end of the book. Oh man, it's so cheesy. Seriously, this is what happens when you're 13, 14 years old and trying to write like serious Arwen Aragorn level romance. I know nothing of love, save that I have never loved anyone within this world as I now love you. Ugh, gross, barf. Don't do that, guys, don't do that. My policy now, honestly, is to try and avoid the words I love you as much as possible. Not that there's anything wrong with those words. Lots of writers can do really, really cute things with that in their romance storylines. For me, I love it when writers find ways of saying that without saying it. When characters have like inside jokes with each other that is like their equivalent of saying I love you, like as you wish, for example, or little subtle ways of showing it instead of explicitly saying it. I think those are just adorable. So, as first drafts go, I don't think it's that bad. If I went back and read it all from like beginning to end, there would probably be a lot of cringy moments. There are cringy moments that I can think of even now. But there's something so cool about being able to go back and look at stuff that you did that long ago and see that you've made progress. I was afraid of that for so long, so embarrassed of it and afraid to like look back on old stuff because I didn't want to be reminded of it. But like that's part of the process. You have to start somewhere. You don't just start writing magical things when you're 13 years old if you haven't written a story before. And honestly, it just makes me more thankful for all the lessons that God has used other authors and other books and just time to teach me about writing and about what makes a good story. It's all a learning experience, it's all a journey, and it's all good. So thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you feel encouraged potentially to go back and read some of your old stuff and not be afraid of it. If you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe. And as always, do not forget to spend some time in the clouds today.